name is Benji, and I run the Legacy Crusaders YouTube channel, and I'm giving this guest upload to Invoked 101 as a thank you for joining me on my how-to series on how to play Speedroids. If you're interested in that, click that in the link up above. Please check out a lot of the information in the description of this video for supporting Invoked 101. And I figured I would share my Infernoid deck list with you guys because I know for a fact there is not a single Infernoid deck on this channel, so might as well be the first. Thanks again for having me. So this is an interesting Infernoid deck. Firstly, it is technically a budget deck. I mean, I have all the expensive cards that other people play. I'm not playing them. Like, I don't play the Gamma package. I don't play the Gamma package, I don't play the Monster Gates, which are cheap, but I don't play the Extravagances. I don't play Lair, which means there's no Lilith. So there's a lot of things other people play I don't play. So I'm just going to run through my list. It has a different game plan than the Lair builds. I find the Lair builds are a bit more win now or lose, so I didn't really feel like potentially losing at all. So I wanted to make my deck a little bit more solid. So I remove some of the randomness for kind of consistency in playing my game the way I always plan to play my game. So this is a hard-going second deck. We'll start with the main deck, and then we'll get into the side and extra. Firstly, I'm playing 3 copies of Infernoid Decatron. Whenever he's summoned, you can send any Infernoid from your deck to grave, gain its name, effect, and levels. Very good. Best card in Yu-Gi-Oh! Best tuner in the game. Can be any level in the game from 1 to 11. I'm playing 1 copy of Infernoid Prometheus, 1 copy of Infernoid Antra, and 1 copy of Infernoid Harmodic. This one sends a set card back into your opponent's deck, and the card targeted cannot be activated in response. Similar to Night Beam, so this is one of the ways to out-counter traps without them going off. Antra can bounce face-up cards your opponent controls, can't bounce your own stuff. And Harmodic can pop monsters, anybody's monsters, but he cannot attack the turn he uses this effect. Both of these can attack the turn they use their effect, which is relevant because when Decatron is summoned, he takes on their effect, so he can spin things and still attack. Alright. I play 2 copies of Petrula and 1 copy of Sajet. Petrula destroys spells or trap cards, similar to Harmodic. Cannot attack the turn you activate that effect. All the small Infernoids have the same quick effect during your opponent's turn. You contribute a monster you control to banish a card in your opponent's graveyard. Also, all of these Infernoids other than Decatron have a summoning restriction that you cannot summon them if the total level of effect monsters and or of ranks and or effect monsters you control is currently above 8. Playing 1 copy of Sajet. This is to resolve Void Feast. He requires you to banish 2 Infernoids to summon him. The little ones all require you to banish 1 to summon him. He has a quick effect to banish a card from the graveyard by attributing a monster you control during either player's turn, and so do all the big Infernoids. His other effect is when he declares an attack, you can make your opponent banish a card from the extra deck. I never do this because he gets ogred, and I don't really feel like getting him ogred. Although, if you resolve that at least 1 time against a deck that plays Extravagance, you can prevent them from resolving the 3rd Extravagance. I'm playing 1 copy of Seitzmoss and 1 copy of Atondel. He attacks twice if he destroys a monster by battle and sends it to the graveyard. At the end of the battle phase, he can banish a card on the field if you battle the monster. They both require 2 Infernoids to be banished to summon them. They can be summoned more than once per turn. And they both also have the effect, the quick effect to attribute a monster you control to banish a card in the graveyard. I'm playing 2 copies of Infernoid Deviati. This requires 3 to summon from your hand or graveyard. The middle ones can be summoned from your hand or graveyard. The big ones can be summoned from your hand and graveyard. And the little ones can only be summoned from your hand. So we try to keep those in hand when we can. When you summon Deviati, it destroys all spell and trap cards on the field except void spell and traps. So your cards stay and your opponent's cards go bye-bye. It also has the effect to, quick effect, once per turn, tribute a monster you control, negate the activation of a monster, and if you do, banish that card. Play 2 copies of Inoku. He's kind of the opposite. When he's summoned, he destroys all monsters on the field except himself. Except Infernoids, that would be really broken. Requires 3 banishes. When a spell, trap, or effect of a spell or trap is activated, you contribute a monster, negate the effect, and if you do, banish that card. Now I'm playing a few hand traps. I'm playing 2 copies of Ash Blossom. It's a fire deck, so there is some synergy with this. And I play 1 copy of DD Crow. I just wanted the option to banish cards in my opponent's graveyard during my first turn, so I play 1 copy. Maybe it could be 3 Ash, maybe it should be 3 Crow. Doesn't really matter, you know, hand traps develop based on the format we're in, and currently the format is undiscovered. At the moment I'm playing one copy of Gizmek Orochi because I wanted an alternative win condition to if my push ends and all my cards get used and I don't win the game. Gizmek Orochi gives me the ability to make a 0 Boros really big. Also, he can help me push through the battle phase against Nibiru, so you can just like go into the battle phase with not enough damage on field and then just summon him from your hand or your graveyard if your opponent forgets he's there. He's a really good card. So those are the monsters. I'm playing 2 infinite impermanents and 1 evenly matched. So sort of 3 more hand traps. I was playing 3 evenlies in the main deck because I am going second, so I am trying to play a lot of cards that either blow out my opponent's board or stop them from playing. I swapped over to the impermanences because of the infinite negate, and I figured this might help me prevent myself from getting comboed to that point to begin with. So I figured imperm might be a bit of a safer play, whereas if my opponent establishes a board, an evenly matched might not even be playable. So I went with 1 in the main because I like to have these big power cards, and I didn't want to overcommit to imperm in case it was unnecessary. So I have enough stops in the form of hand traps, but it is nice to have cards in your deck that you can play. So if a card's not in your deck, you can't resolve its effects. So I like to play at least 1 of some cards. If the format develops more, it'll make more sense what to play instead. I'm playing 3 copies of Void Feast. This lets you summon 3 Infernoids from your deck whose total level is 8 by sending a face-up Void card or a Void spell or trap from your hand to the graveyard or from face-up on the field. There are a lot of combos you can do with this. You usually summon the level 6 and 2 Decatrons. If you draw the level 6, you do either Decatron, Harmadic, Petrula. That's 1, 3, 4. You can also just do other combinations because it's up to 3 monsters, so you can do it with 2 monsters or just 1 monster if you need to. It also lets you control your monster count, which is important because of the way this deck functions. Most people don't play this card. I play 1 copy of Void Purification because of the way I play my deck, and I will explain what that is when we get to that. So those are the trap cards. I only put the trap cards next because the hand traps are right near the imperms. I'm playing 3 copies of the best card in the deck, which is Void Banishment. This is the card that lets you go first. When you activate this card, nothing happens. It gives your Infernoid monsters the ability to be DD Warrior Lady. So after damage calc, regardless of what happened, you can send this to grave and banish both monsters, which is really good. But its other effect is once per turn, you can discard a card and add any Void spell or trap from your deck to your hand. And the spells and traps in this deck are crazy. So you can add Feast to summon 3 guys, and it itself can be the cost for the Feast. Or you can add the next card, which is the blowout card of the deck. But if you use that effect and it resolves, you cannot summon anything that aren't Infernoids for the rest of the turn. So some people's decks can't OTK if they use this because most Infernoid decks are designed to be played to win with Imagination, which is the next card. And if you use this to search it, you can only summon Infernoid, so it's very difficult to put out the 8,000. So I'm playing 3 copies of Void Imagination. This is Shadal Fusion, but way better. It's also worse in its own ways. If your opponent controls an extra deck monster and you do not, so that's the worst part, you can send this card face up on the field to the graveyard, which is a cost, so you can't ogre this card, to fusion summon using up to 6 Infernoids from your deck as fusion material. So you just send the required materials to summon your big fusion monster, which is 1 Anoku, 1 Deviati, and any other number of Infernoids. You just send 4 big ones because they could all be summoned from the grave. And it gets you 6 guys and a big guy on the board. He's level 11, so there are ways to get him off your field, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But yeah, this card, any 2 of them into an extra deck monster should be game. That's even if you activate Banishment, the way I played my deck. I'm playing 3 copies of Rekindling, which Decatron happens to be a fire monster with 200 defense. And if you were to summon all the Decatrons out of the deck off of Void Feasts, or send them to the grave off of Imagination, which you can do because there's nothing preventing you from using duplicate names, you can just soul charge all your Decatrons. And as I said before, Decatron, best tuner in the game. I play 1 copy of Monster Reborn. It lets you OTK in your Infernoid deck using 1 Imagination and Monster Reborn. So it's kind of like improves my odds of opening 2 Imaginations. Also just a solid card. I'm playing in the main deck for backer removal, 1 Twin Twister and 1 Galaxy Cyclone. I wanted 1 quick play card that I could actually out a card but in response to like an anti-spell or something. I don't like to overcommit to cards like that, like the evenly matched, the Twin Twister. None of them are... It's not overdoing my main deck, but, you know, I'm realistic. I might have to play against back row. Galaxy Cyclone pops a set card, and then other than the turn it's sent to the graveyard, you can banish from grave to target a face-up spell or trap on the field and destroy it. That could be your opponent's Mystic Mine or Floodgates or anything like that. Because I'm a going second deck and I don't really care if my opponent makes a board, I just main triple Dark Ruler no more. I don't need to kill my opponent on the first turn, but so if I have Imperm instead, I could potentially just game them right then and there. But if I just break a constructed board after Dark Rulering, they're not going to be able to mount a defense on the following turn anyway. So Dark Ruler is fine. There's also some boards in the game that can only be broken by Dark Ruler. And like I said before, if a card's not in your deck, can't use it. So last but not least, the one that would be controversial, so I play 3 copies of Mystic Mine. I lied, I play 4 copies of Mystic Mine because this pretty much lets me resolve my Shaddoll Fusion unopposed. Also, it's all the monsters in this deck are technically bricks and you never really want to draw them, so this gives you the time to avoid being bricked. So if you can stick your opponent under this for a while, you can just wait and draw into cards. This is also the reason I like that Void Trap card that lets me add my Infernoids back from my graveyard to my hand during my opponent's turn, because they won't be able to play for several turns. Also, my Galaxy Cyclone lets me turn off my own mine when I'm ready to play. Also, just drawing an additional copy of mine would allow you to turn one off by just setting it over the other one. Also, you have the edge that your deck can tribute monsters just to get them off the field. So if I brick pretty hard, I can just normal Decatron as an Infernoid that can tribute itself and then activate mine. Now, I can't activate any effects, but if my opponent puts a monster on board, I can just tribute it if the scenario works out for that and lock them under mine. So a lot of cool stuff there. So that's my main deck. It's 45 cards at the moment. I'm a little bit above 40 because I'm actually trying to make siding easier. Getting to my big power cards doesn't matter if I can't do anything, so I still need to play the mines and the Dark Rulers just to break the opponent's boards. And you still need to run a fair amount of Infernoids just to, play the deck. So playing a few extra cards I didn't find to be such a big deal. I'll show my side deck. I play the other 2 copies of Evenly Matched. I play 1 red Reboot. It's all for trap decks. Preferably, I would prefer the Reboot. This is also decent against some boards, so depending on the board your opponent makes, this card might actually resolve and banish all their stuff. I play the Reboot for trap decks, and I also play 3 copies of Witch's Strike for trap decks, because if you go up against Altergeist or Subterrors or any deck that just sets traps, maybe just a border stun deck, their deck is designed to just activate Solemn Strike and negate something, and then eventually they have to negate something, and that means whenever they do that, they lose the game. So you can just afford to go second to try and increase your odds of drawing this card, because odds are they're not putting in Stormduster against an Infernoid deck. So you just set this, and then eventually you activate a card they negate, and then you win the game because they have no cards on the field. I mean, they can Judgment it, and then you can use another one because it's not once per turn, so 2 of them works out pretty well. Also, I'm siding 3 Forbidden Chalice. This is just another... I take out the Dark Rulers for it if I expect my opponent to make me go first, which they will because they know I'm going second. Occasionally, this card has to come in. I didn't really want to play the 3rd Imperm because you can't combo 2 Imperms, where you can combo Forbidden Chalice with other cards on field. Like, you can Imperm a card and then chain Forbidden Chalice. It's one of the ways to beat the Apex Avian Infinite Negate, but it's kind of difficult because they can just put their Apex behind Simorg and then you can't target it, so it gives you the option for that. Also, this is one of the cards that beats Dweller, and none of the Infernoids activate in the graveyard, but your Elder Entity and Test and your extra deck do, so you don't really want to get Dwellered. This also is an out for something like True King of All Calamities, and just the fact that your opponent doesn't expect to get impermed while you have cards on the field from your hand. So this is a nice card for that kind of thing. I'm siding my other 2 twins at the moment. I originally didn't expect the Lunalight deck to get hit so hard, but they had a combo in their deck that could let them end on the DDD, the rank 8. I can't remember his name. King Kali-Yuga, I believe. He negates everything on the field. So this was an out for the rank up spell, which can only be activated during the main phase. So if they were to do the rank up spell for Kali-Yuga, you can just twin it during the standby, because it gets added to hand by the effect of a Phantom Knight monster. Then you can just destroy it during the standby phase or the draw phase so that they don't get the opportunity to activate it, and then their whole deck doesn't do anything. That's assuming that deck's still being played. Next, I'm playing 1 Raigeki, which I wouldn't normally do. I don't own Lightning Storm, which I can get, and I just haven't felt the need to get it yet. It would be nice to not have to discard things to pop back row, or have a way that can alternatively pop monsters, but most people just put their guys in defense. But I was prepared for this format for dealing with the Infinite Negate Cyber Dragons or Rocket decks, and I figured I'd go with Amano Owato, because what it does is it turns a lot of my cards that don't normally work against those broken Infinite Negate boards into cards that do work. So If you're forced to go first, normal Amano activate mine is a very safe play, because even though your Amano can't activate in the end phase to return to your hand, your opponent can't activate any monster effects, so they have to try and out this card without using any monster effects at the same time as getting rid of the mine. So odds are they'll just pass back to you after trying to establish some sort of defense. Also, if you're dealing with the rocket board, the most annoying card on that board is Heavenly Spheres, so I don't really want to deal with Heavenly Spheres, so this is the only card that really stops it. They won't be able to negate anything. If you summon a mono, activate Raigeki, that's the dream. But summon a mono, activate mine is the same thing. Then a mono comes back to hand at the end of the turn, and then you can just do whatever you want on the following turns. It's an alternative to not drawing into Dark Ruler no more. So that's my current side deck. Things are always subject to change. My extra deck currently, I play 2 copies of Tiara, because 2 Imaginations is game. Also, you don't want to lose the game to getting your Tiara banished by Silver Rocket Dragon, or True King of Disaster, Lithosagem, because he banishes 3 extra deck cards. So you want to play at least 2. If you were playing Extravagance, you would play the 3rd one. I have considered playing the 3rd one because there is a possibility of getting hit with 2 Silver Rocket Dragons, one on your opponent's turn and one on your turn. But it hasn't happened yet, so far I'm confident the way I am. Playing 3 Nates. This is actually why I think Imagination is the better card than Feast. Both cards are really good, and some people say I shouldn't play 3 Feast in a going second deck, but you don't choose if you're going second sometimes, so I wanted to main my next best card. Also, some decks don't go into the extra deck, so Feast is at 3 in my deck. But if you can resolve Feast, popping 3 of your opponent's cards is really good. Now, previous formats, you used to have to use one of them to test to pop your Tiara, because as I mentioned earlier, it's level 11, and it prevents you from summoning more Infernoids, because you can only summon if your levels or ranks are below 8. Well, 8 or below. Now we've got a new monster that deals with that problem. We have 1 gravity controller, so unless you had to search off a Vanishment, you can make your Tiara into a gravity controller. Now you can't link it away, but you can tribute it off if you needed the extra monster zone, but really it just turns your level 11 into a level 0. Now I forgot to mention that Imagination has an effect on field that reduces your monster's levels to 1. So if you resolve 1 Imagination and summon Tiara, you can then activate the second one to make it level 1, summon another Infernoid from graveyard, tribute it off, tribute off the Tiara, and then fuse again because you no longer control an extra deck monster. And then you have 8k, because you summon 2 big guys, then tribute Tiara, then summon another Tiara, and you pop their cards, hopefully. Hopefully you've popped 3 of their cards, possibly even 4, if you play Psyframe Lord Omega. So on the first fusion summon, you can use Tiara's effect to send 2 Natesses to grave, because when you summoned, you send 3 extra deck cards to grave. You can send 2 and Omega to pop 1 of their cards, and then you can use Omega to put 1 of them back, and then on the second fuse you can do the third and the 4th. So you could potentially pop up to 4 cards on your opponent's field. And you can do a lot of this while your opponent's stuck under Mystic Mine if you play it correctly. You can actually Imagination, activate Tiara, send the 3 Natesses. Then when the Natesses activate, you can either pop your Mine or your opponent's cards and then chain Feast while they can't Ash you. It's really good. For Link monsters, I play 1 copy of Salamangreat Almirage. This is to link off a normal summon Decatron, just so it goes to the grave for rekindling. Also, funny story, if you get given a Sphere Mode, you can turn that into this, because Sphere Mode is a big level monster, which is normal summoned, but it has 0 attack on the field, so you can get rid of it. Some people play Linkaribo, but Linkaribo just helps your second and third Decatrons avoid getting Veilered, which I don't think is good enough justification to play it. This card lets me get rid of a Decatron who successfully was summoned, and then I can do something to an opponent's card, turn it into this, and then rekindling, even if it didn't get Veilered. But even if it did get Veilered, you can summon Almirage. An OTK enabler would be Doolittle Chimera, Doolittle, and any 2 big Infernoids is game, assuming they can't stop you, obviously. Playing 1 Nightmare Phoenix for popping back row. This is also works in conjunction with another card in my extra deck, that is Akashic Magician, which is kind of nice because you make Akashic, you use Feast, and you summon Decatron to the 2 zones underneath the extra monster zone and Sajet to the middle zone. You do this either during your opponent's end phase or at some point. It doesn't matter when, but if your opponent takes either extra monster zone, it doesn't matter which one they take. Let's say they take this one. You take your Decatron in this zone and your Sajet, put it over here together as Akashic, and then Akashic will bounce your Decatron back to your hand, so you get to normal summon it again. use its effect again, pop cards with the 2 Decatrons before that, pop with the 3rd Decatron, then summon any Infernoid, make a Nightmare Phoenix, pop a back row, and draw a card off of Phoenix. And then you get to use Akashic's second effect, which is to potentially add cards from the top of your deck to your hand. So you can just call Rekindling and try and draw into Soul Charge off of this. Also, it could help you mill your Gizmek, and then you have like another Broken Beater out of nowhere. So it's a sick combo. I play 1 copy of Hida Fire Charmer Ablazed. This is to go into the Infernoid Equimax OTK. If your opponent ashed you at some point in the game, you can just take an Infernoid at any monster, including the Nibiru token. So this does happen sometimes. Make Hida, bring back your opponent's ash, make Equimax. In the extra monster zone, then you summon 2 big Infernoids to its zone, attack with Equimax, then use their effects to tribute him, so now they can attack. So that's those. I play 1 Boros Sword, because OTK, and 1 Zero Boros. I was trying to find a deck that wasn't Grand Maju that can play Zero Boros pretty well, and Infernoids banish enough of their cards to get a decent amount of attack, but I didn't really justify playing it without playing 1 Gizmek in the main deck. So I wanted to have the option to have a big Zero Boros, because you can like fuse on your opponent, then just summon a bunch of Infernoids. You can even just summon the Infernoids and banish your opponent's stuff in gray by tributing them, and then summon them again until you've banished 10 of your cards and like 4 of their cards, and then just summon Zero Boros and he gets really big. So yeah, that's my deck list. I'm just going to share some text that people I haven't seen in other Infernoid decks. I'm not actually playing them at the moment, but I'm just going to run through some cards here. I considered adding cards like 1 Day of Peace to my deck, not saying 1 Day of Peace is a good card, but which for when you expect your opponent to make you go first. I don't see the point of trying to go first with an Infernoid deck. Odds are, unless you built it to go first, which there are builds that go first, it won't be good enough. So I figured put cards in that let me go 3rd. So pretty much anything that says I can't die says I can just play my going 2nd game on the next turn. So it could be 1 Day of Peace, it could be Set Wabaku, I was playing Spiritual Swords of Revealing Light, Ghost Bell, and Dogwood. All these cards have different problems. So this one's okay. Other ones that are worth mentioning, some people don't want to pay for extravagance, so they'll try Perform a Palpopper Upper to draw cards. I don't really care about price, but this card just gets ashed, you get neg 4, so I don't really want to do that. Other cards, like I don't play Call by the Grave, because if you just play 2 Imaginations, you shouldn't need to Call by the Grave on an Ash. I actually started playing Ash so my opponent can call by my Ash, so that they couldn't Ash me on the following turn. Some people play 1 for 1, and Reasoning, and Monster Gate. I don't play those cards because I want to play hand traps. 1 for 1's okay, but I don't think 1 Decatron is good enough to justify playing this card. I mean, it's nice to have more Ash bait, but going 2nd, you can play Card Destruction. So if you don't open one of the broken good cards, you can try and draw into more cards. Magical Mallet in some formats was considered good for this deck, because you can, in the old builds I used to play, that Grasslick Screener, you can just, it didn't matter what your cards were, because in your hand if you didn't have grass, so you just Mallet and try and draw grass again. But you can do that for Imagination also. I don't think I have space that justifies playing this card, but if you had a 38 card build, Mallet's not the worst, because a lot of the cards in this deck just win the game. Wouldn't necessarily recommend that. Shared Ride or Phantasme allow you to set a feast without a void card for the cost, and then potentially draw into it. So Phantasme or Shared Ride would get you to that. If you want to go first, Pot of Duality is really nice. Other texts. Power of the Guardians lets you make your sight spots really big, because if he just has to battle, he has to live. So this prevents him from dying by battle and lets him get really big, and you can banish cards on field. I've never tried this one. In theory, it should work. I've played Safe Zone before, so I used to be able to attack into Cosmo ships. Pot of Acquisitiveness. I played this in a format where I had to play a very tiny monster count, because I really needed to play 40 cards, because I couldn't beat Zoo because they were just too consistent. So I needed a way to shrink my monster count. So this let me kind of replace 2 monsters in my deck by cutting 3 monsters by playing this instead, so you can recycle. You could even like draw the Sajet early and put it back in your deck. Other cards, the Void Field spell is a way that you can have a searchable way to turn off your mine if you play it. Also makes Terraforming Void Feast into a combo. This is the card I really wanted to get to. This is a tech card that no one's really talking about at all. It was played in an OCG deck list for Utopia doubling people. Pretty much if your opponent was playing a deck that went into a field spell, you just activate Mystic Mind from your deck and you can't get ashed. This is pop-up. It's common from Duelist Alliance. If your opponent controls a field spell and you don't, activate a field spell from your deck. It's crazy. I cut it because it doesn't work against the rocket deck, because they pretty much never end on a field spell, and a lot of Spiral players have started letting they let their field spell die and then add it back to their hand in the end phase off of Barricade Board Blocker's effect, so this card became less and less useful. But it's good against Salad, it's good against Invoked, so, you know, it's worth considering playing at least. I was playing Eater of Millions at one point to turn off my mind, because sometimes you just wind up passing more turns than you plan on sticking your opponent under mine, so Eater of Millions can just eat mine off the board. Dogwood was to potentially win in time at the same time as making sure you can't die if your opponent made you go first. Phantasme, like I mentioned, you can draw into what do you call it? A void card. Why do you have Void Fee set? Barrier Statue of the Infernos is something I considered for going first, because currently I'm trying a deck with my brother that summons Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds, which is why I wanted to do this Speedroid video with Invoke 10N, because I wanted to figure out how to play a functional Speedroid deck and then import my combo that ends on Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds into that deck. I was looking for alternatives of cards to link to my Akashic Magician. Security Dragon's pretty good. Or Pentasag would also be an alternative, or Nightmare Cerberus. These cards all let you point at your Akashic Magician. That way you can still look at the top two cards and see if there's any rekindlings there, or whatever card you want to add. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is just ideas I don't really want to make this video any longer for, so thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, make sure you click the like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell. Check out all the links in the description to all the other cool things you can do to support the channel. Thank you very much for watching.